Test 3. This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to part 1. Part 1. You will hear a man called Jack giving advice to a friend about surfing holidays. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Jack, I'm thinking of taking the kids to the seaside on a surfing holiday this summer, and I wanted to ask your advice, as I know you're such an expert.
Well, I don't know about that. But yes, I've done a bit of surfing over the years. I'd thoroughly recommend it. I think it's the kind of holiday all the family can enjoy together. The thing about surfing is that it's great for all ages and all abilities. My youngest started when he was only 3.
Wow! But it's quite physically demanding, isn't it? I've heard you need to be pretty fit.
Yes, you'll certainly learn more quickly and won't tire as easily.
Well, that should be okay for us. You've been surfing a few times in Ireland, haven't you?
Yes, there's some great surfing there, which people don't always realise.
And which locations would you recommend? There seem to be quite a few.
Yes, there are loads. Last year we went to County Donegal. There are several great places to surf there.
What about in County Clare? I read that's also really good for surfing.
Yes, it is. I've been there a few times. Most people go to Lahinch. My kids love it there. The waves aren't too challenging and the town is very lively.
Are there good hotels there?
Yes, some very nice ones. And there are also a few basic hostels and campsites. It's great if you need lessons, as the surf schools are excellent.
Sounds good.
Yes, and there's lots to see in the area, like those well-known cliffs. I've forgotten the name of them.
Oh, don't worry. I can look them up.
I've also been surfing in County Mayo, which is less well known for surfing, but we had a really good time. That was a few years ago when the kids were younger. There's a good surf school at Caroniski Beach.
How do you spell that?
CARONISKEY.
Okay.
I put the kids into the surf camp they run during the summer for 10 to 16-year-olds.
Oh, right. How long was that for?
3 hours every day for a week. It was perfect. They were so tired out after that.
I can imagine.
One thing we did while the kids were surfing was to rent some kayaks to have a look around the bay, which is nearby. It's really beautiful.
Oh, I'd love to do that.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Now, the only time I went to Ireland, it rained practically every day.
Yes, that can be a problem. But you can surf in the rain, you know.
It doesn't have the same appeal somehow.
Well, the weather's been fine the last couple of years when I've been there. But actually, it tends to rain more in August than in the spring or autumn. September's my favourite month because the water is warmer then.
The only problem is that the kids are back to school then.
I know. But one good thing about Irish summers is that it doesn't get too hot. The average temperature is about 19 degrees, and it usually doesn't go above 25 degrees.
That sounds all right. Now, what about costs?
Surfing is a pretty cheap holiday, really. The only cost is the hire of equipment. You can expect to pay a daily rate of about €30 for the hire of a wetsuit and board. But you can save about €40 if you hire by the week.
That's not too bad.
No. It's important to make sure you get good quality wetsuits. You'll all get too cold if you don't. And make sure you also get boots. They keep your feet warm, and it's easier to surf with them on too.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that.
That is the end of part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 1. Part 2. You will hear the manager of a childcare service at a primary school talking to parents at an open day about the school's childcare service offered before and after school. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good afternoon. My name's Mrs. Carter and I run the before and after school extended hours childcare service. I hope you've had a chance to have a good look around the school and talk to staff and pupils. I know that many of you are interested in using our childcare service when your child joins the school. And perhaps you already know something about it. But for those that don't, I'll go through the main details now. We offer childcare for children from the ages of 4 to 11, both before and after school. I know that many parents who work find this service invaluable. You can leave your child with us, safe in the knowledge that they will be extremely well cared for. We're insured to provide care for up to 70 children, although we rarely have this many attending at any one session. I think we generally expect around 50 to 60 children for the afternoon sessions, and about half that number for the breakfast sessions. Although we currently do have 70 children registered with us, not all of these attend every day. It's 10 years since we began offering an extended hours service, and we've come a long way during that time. When we first opened, we only had about 20 children attending regularly. We try to keep our costs as low as we can, and we think we provide very good value for money. For the afternoon sessions, which run from 3:30 until 6 p.m, it's £7.20. But if you prefer, you can pay for 1 hour only, which costs £3.50, or 2 hours, which costs £5.70. The cost of the childcare includes food and snacks. They'll be given breakfast in the morning and in the afternoon, a healthy snack as soon as they finish school. At 5 p.m, children are given something more substantial, such as pasta or a casserole. Please inform us of any allergies that your child might have, and we'll make sure they're offered a suitable alternative. As you may know, the childcare service runs through the school holidays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We offer a really varied and exciting programme to keep the children entertained. We don't want them to feel as if they are still at school. It will also feel different because they'll get the chance to make new friends with children from other schools. Spaces are available for them because a lot of our term time children don't always attend during the holiday. In the past, parents have asked if children over the age of 11 are allowed to come with their younger brothers and sisters, but I'm afraid we're unable to do this because of the type of insurance we have.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So now let me tell you about some of the activities that your child can do during the after-school sessions. As well as being able to use the playground equipment, computers, and the library, there is usually at least one special activity that children can do each day. For example, Spanish. We have a specialist teacher coming in every Thursday to give a basic introduction to the language through games and songs. She does 2 sessions, one for the over 8s and one for the younger children. This is the only activity which we have to make an extra charge for, but it's well worth it. Once a week, the children have the opportunity to do some music. We're very lucky that one of our staff is a member of a folk band. On Mondays, she teaches singing and percussion to groups of children. We do rely on parental support for this, so if any of you sing or play an instrument and would be prepared to help out at these sessions, we'd be delighted. Painting continues to be one of the most popular activities. To begin with, we weren't keen on offering this because of the extra mess involved, but children kept asking if they could do some art, and so we finally gave in. Art is great for helping the children to relax after working hard at school all day. Yoga is something that we've been meaning to introduce for some time, but haven't been able to find anyone available to teach it, until now that is. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully, children will benefit in all sorts of ways from this. Cooking is another popular activity. They make a different sort of cake or pizza or bread each week. Although the younger children love doing it, we found that the mess was just too much. So we've decided to restrict this to the over 8s, as they are better able to clean up after themselves.
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 2. Part 3. You will hear Holly, a student on an events management course, talking to her tutor about her work placement. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hello, Dr. Green. I'm here to talk to you about my work placement.
Oh yes, it's Holly, isn't it?
Yes.
So, which work placement have you chosen?
I decided to go for the Orion Stadium placement. The event I'll be managing is one where I'm helping to set up a sports competition for primary school children.
Yep, that's always a popular placement, even though it can be tougher than you think, working with children.
I know, but it's the fresh air that attracts me. Organising something indoors doesn't have the same appeal, even though it might be fun.
Okay, so obviously safety is going to be one of your key concerns for this event?
Yes, I've already thought about that. I'll need to make sure none of the equipment's damaged.
Ah, well, you'll be working with schools, so the equipment will be their responsibility. However, the grounds and what goes on there will be yours.
Oh, I see. That'll include keeping everyone within the boundary once they're in their kit and on the field?
Exactly. You'll need to inspect areas like changing rooms as well, for anything someone can trip over, but your main priority will be not to lose anyone.
Right. I'll need staff to help with that.
And don't forget about the spectators.
I was thinking that many of them will be parents who could help run the event.
I wouldn't rely on that. They'll be more interested in filming their children than volunteering.
I'll need to make sure they don't interfere with events doing that.
And that's not always easy, especially when a proud parent's trying to get a snap of their child and you want them to move elsewhere.
Okay. What about the scheduling?
With sporting events, there are all sorts of things that can alter the timetable, like rain, for instance, though so far we've always been lucky with that.
Yeah, and I was thinking about what to do if someone got hurt as well. I know that last year that caused a terrible delay.
You have to be prepared for such things.
Oh, what if a match ends in a draw? Do you let the teams keep going until someone wins?
That'll be up to you. And again, you need to plan for it.
Right.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Now, the aim of your work placement is to give you the opportunity to develop the skills that an events manager needs. So, let's talk about those a bit.
Well, I think my communication skills are pretty good. I can talk on the phone to people and book venues and that kind of thing.
Good. Just remember, it isn't only about what you say. If you meet someone face to face and want to persuade them to be a sponsor, for example...
Oh, I'll dress up for that, sure.
Good. Let's go on to think about your organisational skills. You're working in a very people-based industry, and that means things won't always go to plan.
I guess it's being prepared to make changes that matters.
That's right. You may have to make an on-the-spot change to a timetable because of a problem you hadn't anticipated.
Just do it, okay.
How's your time management these days?
I'm working on it. I'm certainly better when I have a deadline, which is why this work suits me.
Yes, but it's how you respond as that deadline approaches.
I know I've got to look calm, even if I'm in a panic.
Just think to yourself, no one must know I'm under pressure.
Yeah, even though I'm multitasking like crazy.
Another skill that events managers need is creativity. Often your client has what we call the big picture idea, but it's up to the events manager to think of all the fine points that go to making it work.
Right. So I need to listen carefully to that idea and then fill in all the gaps.
That's right. And you'll have a team working under you. So another key skill is leadership. Your team may have lots of ideas too, but you've got to make the ultimate choices. Do we have refreshments inside or out, for example?
Isn't it better to be democratic?
It's a nice idea, but you have the ultimate responsibility. So believe in what you think best. Be prepared to say, yes, that's a good idea, but it won't work here.
I see what you mean. What about the networking side of things? I know it's an area that a lot of students worry about because we don't have much experience to offer others.
But even without it, you can still be an interesting person with useful ideas. And the more people you impress, the better.
I guess that will help me when I apply for a real job.
Exactly. Think ahead. Remember what your ambitions are and keep them in mind.
Definitely.
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 3. Part 4. You will hear a zoology student giving a presentation on bird migration. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Scientists believe that a majority of the Earth's bird population migrate in some fashion or other. Some travel seasonally for relatively short distances, such as birds that move from their winter habitats in lowlands to mountaintops for the summers. Others, like the Arctic tern, travel more than 25,000 miles seasonally between the northern and southern poles. Bird migration has been studied over many centuries through a variety of observations. But until relatively recently, where birds went to in the winter was considered something of a mystery. The lack of modern science and technology led to many theories that we now recognise as error-filled and even somewhat amusing. Take Hibernation Theory, for example. 2,000 years ago, it was commonly believed that when birds left an area, they went underwater to hibernate in the seas and oceans. Another theory for the regular appearance and disappearance of birds was that they spent winter hidden in mud till the weather changed and food became abundant again. The theory that some birds hibernate persisted until experiments were done on caged birds in the 1940s, which demonstrated that birds have no hibernation instinct. One of the earliest naturalists and philosophers from ancient Greece was Aristotle, who was the first writer to discuss the disappearance and reappearance of some bird species at certain times of year. He developed the theory of transmutation, the seasonal change of one species into another by observing redstarts and robins. He observed that in the autumn, small birds called redstarts began to lose their feathers, which convinced Aristotle that they changed into robins for the winter and back into redstarts in the summer. These assumptions are understandable, given that this pair of species are similar in shape, but are a classic example of an incorrect interpretation based on correct observations. The most bizarre theory was put forward by an English amateur scientist, Charles Morton, in the 17th century. He wrote a surprisingly well-regarded paper, claiming that birds migrate to the moon and back every year. He came to this conclusion as the only logical explanation for the total disappearance of some species. One of the key moments in the development of migration theory came in 1822, when a white stork was shot in Germany. This particular stork made history because of the long spear in its neck, which incredibly had not killed it. Everyone immediately realized this spear was definitely not European. It turned out to be a spear from a tribe in Central Africa. This was a truly defining moment in the history of ornithology, because it was the first evidence that storks spend their winters in sub-Saharan Africa. You can still see the arrow stork in the zoological collection of the University of Rostock in Germany. People gradually became aware that European birds moved south in autumn and north in summer, but didn't know much about it until the practice of catching birds and putting rings on their legs became established. Before this, very little information was available about the actual destinations of particular species and how they travelled there. People speculated that larger birds provided a kind of taxi service for smaller birds by carrying them on their backs. This idea came about because it seemed impossible that small birds, weighing only a few grams, could fly over vast oceans. This idea was supported by observations of bird behaviour, such as the harassment of larger birds by smaller birds. The development of bird ringing by a Danish schoolteacher, Hans Christian Cornelius Mortensen, made many discoveries possible. This is still common practice today and relies upon what is known as recovery. This is when ringed birds are found dead in the place they have migrated to and identified. Huge amounts of data were gathered in the early part of the 20th century, and for the first time in history, people understood where birds actually went to in winter. In 1931, an atlas was published showing where the most common species of European birds migrated to. More recent theories about bird migration vary.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Test 4. This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to part 1. Part 1. You will hear a man phoning to inquire about a cleaning service for his apartment. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello, Easy Life Cleaning Services, Jacinta speaking.
Oh, hello. I'm looking for a cleaning service for my apartment. Do you do domestic cleaning?
Sure.
Well, it's just a 1-bedroom flat. Do you have a basic cleaning package?
Yes, for a 1-bedroom flat, we're probably looking at about 2 hours for a clean. So we do a thorough clean of all surfaces in each room and polish them where necessary. Does your apartment have carpets?
No, I don't have any, but the floor would need cleaning.
Of course, we do that in every room. And we do a thorough clean of the kitchen and bathroom.
Okay.
Then we have some additional services which you can request if you want. So, for example, we can clean your oven for you every week.
Actually, I hardly ever use that. But can you do the fridge?
Sure. Would you like that done every week?
Yes, definitely. And would ironing clothes be an additional service you can do?
Yes, of course.
It wouldn't be much, just my shirts for work that week.
That's fine. And we could also clean your microwave if you want.
No, I wipe that out pretty regularly, so there's no need for that.
We also offer additional services that you might want a bit less often, say every month. So, for example, if the inside of your windows need cleaning, we could do that.
Yes, that'd be good. I'm on the 15th floor, so the outside gets done regularly by specialists, but the inside does get a bit grubby.
And we could arrange for your curtains to get cleaned if necessary.
No, they're okay. But would you be able to do something about the balcony? It's quite small and I don't use it much, but it could do with a wash every month or so.
Yes, we can get the pressure washer onto that.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Now, if you're interested, we do offer some other possibilities to do with general maintenance. For example, if you have a problem with water and you need a plumber in a hurry, we can put you in touch with a reliable one who can come out straight away. And the same thing if you need an electrician.
Right, that's good to know. I've only just moved here, so I don't have any of those sorts of contacts.
And I don't know if this is of interest to you, but we also offer a special vacuum cleaning system which can improve the indoor air quality of your home by capturing up to 99% of all the dust in the air. So if you're troubled by allergies, this can make a big difference.
Right, in fact, I don't have that sort of problem, but I'll bear it in mind. Now, can you tell me a bit about your cleaning staff?
Of course. So all our cleaners are very carefully selected. When they apply to us, they have to undergo a security check with the police to make sure they don't have any sort of criminal background. And of course, they have to provide references as well. Then if we think they might be suitable for the job, we give them training for it. That lasts for 2 weeks, so it's very thorough, and at the end of it they have a test. If they pass that, we take them on, but we monitor them very carefully. We ask all our clients to complete a review of their performance after every visit and to email it to us, so we can pick up any problems straight away and deal with them.
Okay, well, that all sounds good. And will I always have the same cleaner?
Yes, we do our best to organise it that way, and we usually manage it.
Good, that's fine. Right, so I'd like to go ahead and...
That is the end of part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 1. Part 2. You will hear a training manager giving a talk to a group of senior staff from a hotel chain about the problem of high staff turnover. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
As many of you here today have worked in the hotel industry for some time, I'm sure you have experienced the problem of high staff turnover in your hotels. Every hotel relies on having loyal and experienced members of staff who make sure that everything runs smoothly. If staff are constantly changing, it can make life difficult for everyone. But why do staff leave frequently in many hotels? Of course, many hotel jobs, such as cleaning, are low-skilled and are not well paid. A lot of managers think it's this and the long hours that are the main causes of high staff turnover. But what they don't realise is that it's the lack of training in many hotel jobs which is a huge factor. So what kind of problems does a high turnover of staff cause? Well, having to recruit new staff all the time can be very time-consuming, and managers may have to cover some duties while waiting for new staff to arrive. This means they don't have time to think about less immediate problems, such as how to improve their service. When staff leave, it can also severely affect the colleagues they leave behind. It has a negative effect on remaining staff, who may start to feel that they too should be thinking about leaving. So what can be done to change this situation? Firstly, managers should stop making basic errors which leave their staff feeling upset and resentful. When organising shifts, for example, make sure you never give certain staff preferential treatment. All staff should be given some choice about when they work, and everyone should have to work some evening and weekend shifts. If you treat staff fairly, they'll be more likely to step in and help when extra staff are needed. Keeping staff happy has other tangible benefits for the business. Take the Dunwich Hotel as an example. It had been experiencing a problem with staff complaints, and in order to deal with this, invested in staff training and improved staff conditions. Not only did the level of complaints fall, but they also noticed a significant increase in the amount each customer spent during their stay. They have now introduced a customer loyalty scheme, which is going really well.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Now I'd like to look at some ways you can reduce staff turnover in your hotels. And I'll do this by giving some examples of hotels where I've done some training recently. The Sun Club received feedback which showed that staff thought managers didn't value their opinions. They weren't made to feel they were partners who were contributing to the success of the business as a whole. This situation has changed. Junior staff at all levels are regularly invited to meetings where their ideas are welcomed. A year ago, the Portland recognized the need to invest in staff retention. Their first step was to introduce a scheme for recognizing talent amongst their employees. The hope is that organizing training for individuals with management potential will encourage them to stay with the business. At Blue Water, managers decided to recognize 50 high achievers from across the company's huge hotel chain. As a reward, they're sent on an all-expenses-paid trip abroad every year. Fun is an important element in the trips, but there's also the opportunity to learn something useful. This year's trip included a visit to a brewery, where staff learned about the new beer that would be served in the hotel. Pentlow Hotels identified that retention of junior reception staff was an issue. In order to encourage them to see that working in a hotel could be worthwhile and rewarding with good prospects, they introduced a management program. These staff were given additional responsibilities and the chance to work in various roles in the hotel. Green Planet wanted to be seen as a caring employer. To make life easier for staff, many of whom had childcare responsibilities, the hotel began issuing vouchers to help cover the cost of childcare. Louise Marsh at the Amesbury has one of the best staff retention rates in the business. Since she joined the company, she's made a huge effort to achieve this by creating a cooperative and supportive environment. For her, the staff are part of a large family where everyone is valued. Okay, now I'd like to...
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 2. Part 3. You will hear two students called Jean and Thomas discussing their sports science course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Thomas. How are you enjoying the course so far?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Remind me, why did you decide to study sports science? Didn't you want to be a professional athlete when you were at school?
Yeah, that was my goal, and all my classmates assumed I would achieve it. They thought I was brilliant.
That must have been a nice feeling.
I thought I could win anything. There was no one who could run faster than me.
Exactly. So what happened? Did your mum and dad want you to be more academic?
Not at all. Perhaps they should have pushed me harder, though.
What do you mean?
I think I should have practiced more.
What makes you say that?
Well, I went out to Kenya for a couple of weeks to train.
Really? I didn't know that.
I was chosen to go there out of loads of kids and run with some of the top teenage athletes in the world. And I was so calm about it. I just kept thinking how fortunate I was. What a great chance this was. Everyone back home was so proud of me. But once we started competing, I very quickly realised I wasn't good enough.
That must have been a huge shock.
I thought, this can't be happening. I was used to winning.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's okay. I'm over it now, and I think it's much better to do a university course. And this one has such a variety of sports-related areas. It's going to be good.
Oh, I agree. I chose it because of that.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So, Jian, have you thought of any ideas for the discussion session next week on technology and sport?
We have to cover more than one sport, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, we always think technology is about the future, but we could gather some ideas about past developments in sport.
Look at early types of equipment, perhaps. I remember reading something about table tennis bats once, how they ended up being covered with pimpled rubber.
Because they were just wooden at first, I'd imagine.
Yeah. In about the 1920s, a factory was making rolls of the rubber in bulk for something like horse harnesses.
Really?
Yeah. And someone realised that it would make a perfect covering for the wooden bats.
So, what about cricket? That's had a few innovative changes. Maybe the pads they wear on their legs?
I don't think they've changed much, but I'm just looking on the internet. And it says that when the first cricket helmet came in 1978, the Australian batsman who first wore it was booed and jeered by people watching because it was so ugly.
Oh, wow! Players have to protect themselves from getting hurt. I mean, everyone wears one now.
Unlike the cycle helmet.
Well, unless you're a professional. But you're right, many ordinary bikers don't wear a helmet.
Hey, look at these pictures of original helmet designs. This one looks like an upside-down bowl.
Yet the woman's laughing. She's so proud to be wearing it.
It says serious cyclists ended up with wet hair from all the hard exercise.
I guess that's why they have large air vents in them now, so that the skin can breathe more easily.
OK, so we've done helmets. What about golf balls? Or better still, golf clubs. They've changed a lot.
Yeah. I remember my great-grandfather telling me that because a club was made entirely of wood, it would easily break and players had to get another.
There's no wood at all in them now, is there?
No, they're much more powerful.
The same must be true of hockey sticks.
I don't think so, because players still use wooden sticks today. What it does say here, though, is that when the game started, you had to produce a stick yourself.
I guess they just weren't being manufactured. So, One more, perhaps? What about football?
Well, I know the first balls were made of animal skin.
Yeah, they covered them with pieces of leather that were stitched together. But the balls let in water when it rained.
Oh, that would have made them much heavier.
That's right. You can imagine the damage to players' necks when the ball was headed.
Oh, how painful that must have been.
Yeah. Well, I think we can put together some useful ideas.
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 3. Part 4. You will hear a presentation by a food science student about the production of maple syrup. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to look at another natural food product, and that's maple syrup. What is this exactly? Well, maple syrup looks rather like clear honey, but it's not made by bees. It's produced from the plant fluid, or sap, inside the maple tree, and that makes maple syrup a very natural product. Maple syrup is a thick, golden, sweet-tasting liquid that can be bought in bottles or jars and poured onto foods such as waffles and ice cream, or used in the baking of cakes and pastries. It contains no preservatives or added ingredients, and it provides a healthy alternative to refined sugar. Let's just talk a bit about the maple tree itself, which is where maple syrup comes from. So, there are many species of maple tree, and they'll grow without fertilizer in areas where there's plenty of moisture in the soil. However, they'll only do this if another important criterion is fulfilled, which is that they must have full or partial sun exposure during the day and very cool nights. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. There are only certain parts of the world that provide all these conditions. One is Canada, and by that I mean all parts of Canada. And the other is the northeastern states of North America. In these areas, the climate suits the trees perfectly. In fact, Canada produces over 2/3 of the world's maple syrup, which is why the 5-pointed maple leaf is a Canadian symbol and has featured on the flag since 1964. So, how did maple syrup production begin? Well, long before Europeans settled in these parts of the world, the indigenous communities had started producing maple sugar. They bored holes in the trunks of maple trees and used containers made of tree bark to collect the liquid sap as it poured out. As they were unable to keep the liquid for any length of time, they didn't have storage facilities in those days, They boiled the liquid by placing pieces of rock that had become scorching hot from the sun into the sap. They did this until it turned into sugar, and they were then able to use this to sweeten their food and drinks. Since that time, improvements have been made to the process, but it has changed very little overall. So, let's look at the production of maple syrup today. Clearly, the maple forests are a valuable resource in many Canadian and North American communities. The trees have to be well looked after, and they cannot be used to make syrup until the trunks reach a diameter of around 25 centimeters. This can take anything up to 40 years. As I've already mentioned, maple trees need the right conditions to grow and also to produce sap. Why is this? Well, what happens is that during a cold night, the tree absorbs water from the soil, and that rises through the tree's vascular system. But then, in the warmer daytime, the change in temperature causes the water to be pushed back down to the bottom of the tree. This continual movement, up and down, leads to the formation of the sap needed for maple syrup production. When the tree is ready, it can be tapped, and this involves drilling a small hole into the trunk and inserting a tube into it that ends in a bucket. The trees can often take several taps, though the workers take care not to cause any damage to the healthy growth of the tree itself. The sap that comes out of the trees consists of 98% water and 2% sugar and other nutrients. It has to be boiled so that much of that water evaporates. And this process has to take place immediately using what are called evaporators. These are basically extremely large pans. The sap is poured into these. A fire is built, and the pans are then heated until the sap boils. As it does this, the water evaporates and the syrup begins to form. The evaporation process creates large quantities of steam, and the sap becomes thicker and denser, and at just the right moment, when the sap is thick enough to be called maple syrup, the worker removes it from the heat. After this process, something called sugar sand has to be filtered out, as this builds up during the boiling and gives the syrup a cloudy appearance and a slightly gritty taste. Once this has been done, the syrup is ready to be packaged so that it can be used for a whole variety of products. It takes 40 liters of sap to produce 1 liter of maple syrup, so you can get an idea of how much is needed. So that's the basic process. In places like
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 4.